apologize everything. When you make your best laid plans, planning to chat at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's good. I hadn't calibrated the light. I haven't streamed at 8 a.m. in quite some time. The light's different. So I apologize for fucking this. I was on a deadline. There's not much I can do about it. Anyway, so, and also I got like kids listening, husband listening, fucking fucked up face. I'm only halfway through my first coffee. Fuck Kellogg's, by the way. That's annoying. Anyway. What's and all? It's what we're used to. Anyway, I don't even know if I'm connected because I'm not, again, I'm going to have to play around with times. I'm not convinced that I'm in the best time zone for people to watch live. It might just be something that I have to play with for a while. But anyway, I hope you're well. I hope everyone is well. Despite my face looking puffy and all of that stuff, I'm well. I'm just first thing in the morning. So sorry about the face. Hopefully the chat's working this time, but again, don't know. So just so people know, technically speaking, you can't chat on Periscope anymore. All right. Which is not a bad thing. If you've watched many of my videos, you've seen that most of the fuckwits show up on Periscope. Most of the masturbators show up on Periscope, right? So it's fine. But anyway. So just waffling. It's one of those things where when it's in the morning, it takes me a little longer to sort of get my thoughts together. But I felt the urge to talk about this a little bit. Now, it's only kind of partially, excuse me, this is what happens when you stay up late reading stuff. And then you go, I'm just going to read one more thing or look at one more thing and have one more drink. And then you're like, no. And then your bones and nerves start hurting and you're like, oh, fuck, I only had 4 hours sleep. So that's what's happening. Anyway. Good morning. Hi. How are you? Welcome to the stream of fucking pointlessness and no one watching. Anyway, hi. Those that do watch, thank you. I like the fact that things are a bit quieter now. It's good. Yeah, I quite like that. So let me go. I wish I had more coffee. I have to get Paul to make me a coffee in a minute. I got to make one before I started. But so basically, look, I make a habit of reading things that I may or may not agree with. Okay, so one thing that I try to do, and it's a lot of work and it's hard. I got to say, like being someone who is trying to pursue truth, and this is the irony. This is the irony here. When in the pursuit of truth, rather than just sort of affirmation and, confirmation bias. And again, no one's ever going to be 100% unbiased. And this is largely where I'm getting to with the troll thing, which is that we all got biases. We've all got things where we're destined to fall into sort of a lazy pattern or lazy thing because it feels true. Now, in psychology, I'm paying it forward. So I'm getting my money's worth here. I already knew this. I'm getting my money's worth. But in psychology, that's like a heuristic, right? Because it's a huge mental load, okay? And this is part of the reason why I'm so fucking exhausted all the time. Because challenging your heuristics. So heuristics, you might have heard of schema therapy or schemas, okay? Kind of roughly, loosely the same, similar things. Patterns, pattern memory. The way that our brains are wired, okay, I'm not going to bore you to death. And this is related. It's always related in the end once I warm up. But the way that we are as humans, and this is, I think, a big takeaway for me as well. And this is what makes me, because I thought that psychology would make me more cynical or more sort of removed from humanity. And I think it's actually done the opposite to me, because it's actually given me a lot more empathy, a lot more understanding, because I think that it's a lot easier to just assume that someone is a psychopath, or assume that someone's a troll, or assume that someone's a fuckwit. Humor aside, we're going to talk about humor today. Okay, the science of humor is where this is going. But it makes you more forgiving of difference, especially when you start to understand that people are not all genes, and not all nature, not all nurture. Combination of the two. That's pretty settled. Okay. But when you understand that a lot of this sort of how we are programmed in society to blame the individual, and this comes a lot from America. Okay, a lot of it is American stuff, and under capitalism and all those sort of structural forces. Okay, and I think it's also partially why these disciplines are as siloed as they are, because it's one thing to be in political science or policy and go, okay, well, here's the data around humans here. And then you study psychology and you go, well, here's the data around humans over here and how they behave here. And then you go into something, say, like behavioral economics, and there's a specific narrow view of how humans are. Marx, Adam Smith, economics, philosophy, a lot of these things. And I know that, again, this is one of those things where when all you've got a hammer, you only see nails, right? That's one of those things, right? I'm trying to not do that. That's a heuristic. You see what you want to see, and you leave out bits that you want to leave out to tell yourself stories that reduce your load. Like, they reduce your load as it's very fucking exhausting constantly trying to challenge yourself, challenge your biases, read well, read widely, fucking, really, really like look at why you're triggered about something. Okay, really dig deep and go, okay, why is this upsetting me? Okay, and this is what kind of where this conversation started, which was that I read a book by Jonathan, is it Roach? I haven't heard his name, Jonathan Rauch, The Constitution of Knowledge, which I really wanted to like. I really wanted to like this book, okay? Okay, and when I say like, I don't mean emotionally, but this book actually got really fucking under my skin. And that's hard going, okay? When something really gets under your skin, and if you're somebody who is a little more, like I'm pretty self-aware. I'm not saying that I'm a better person than anybody else, okay? I'm not saying that I'm necessarily, I wouldn't say that I'm wise, but I've learned, again, it's just one of those things with age and experience that you start to become aware of who you are as a person, what's hardwired, what can be changed, what can't be changed, okay? I think a lot of youth is just trying to find yourself and learning to live with who you are, what your weaknesses are. A lot of it is genetic, okay? A lot of it is genetic. And I often joke that kids are like plants. You just water them, feed them, and give them sunlight, and they end up largely becoming who they are. And that's part of the reason why I used to get into fucking fisticuffs in the mummy wars with people who thought that they had more control over their children than they do, because a lot of this stuff is genetic. A lot of it's personality factors, which are hardwired. Again, I'm not saying that extreme trauma. Or, if you look into research on psychopaths, or you look into research on in narcissism, and you look at the sort of the structures, again, this is when you're talking about sort of capitalism and these structures, when we live under these structures, people are largely good, okay? People are largely good. They're often victims of kind of genes, but your environment, much like cancer, okay? You might have a predisposition. You may or may not get it depending on your environment, okay? You may get, lung cancers and things like that if you smoke, but you may get lung cancer with a genetic predisposition to it regardless of your lifestyle. It's the same kind of thing, right? Same thing, like mental illness, right? whatever that means. Again, there's political factors to this as well. And so I read this Constitution of Knowledge, which I think it sounds really good. I liked it. First few chapters, I was like, yeah, I agree with this. This guy's got, I'm a big fan of empirical evidence. I'm a big fan of, respecting epistemology and respecting the things that have come before. It's not a conservative view. That's just how we function. It's again, how we build these patterns and heuristics and all those things to make our load a little less, there's a reason why new generations are smart, have more knowledge, and every generation ends up smarter and has a lot more knowledge and a lot more information to deal with or to access than the generation before it. That's sort of, I'm riffing here, sort of intergenerational, there's a passing on of sort of knowledge. I think that there's something beautiful about human evolution in that regard. Okay. But when that's hijacked by interest and by politics, it becomes a little trickier, because one thing about the culture wars, okay, and I'm going to use that as a fucking broad term, but one thing about the culture wars is that it relies on lazy thinking. It relies on these it kind of counts on the fact that you're going to reduce your load as much as possible. Okay, talked about thought terminating cliches. That's how they work. Thought terminating cliches are the things where on the surface it seems true. It's a nothing statement, maybe a slogan, maybe something like that, but you haven't really thought it through. Okay. Like I don't want to go into the trans thing, but the trans women are women. It's a thought terminating cliche where most people will go, oh yeah, that feels true. That sounds true. But then someone goes, well, hang on. Have you thought this bit through? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Okay. And then you go, oh, okay, that's interesting, because I think on a day-to-day basis, we'll go, yeah, okay, that feels true. I can't see how that's not true. It's fine. Other than, an epic grade of fuckwit, I think most people know what that slogan means politically. It's only when you really unpack things and think it through and go, okay, what does this mean for policy? What does this mean in terms of action? Now, on Friday, I'm going to talk about something else, which is Joe Rogan. I'm going to talk about that. And I'm writing a thing on that as well. But not Friday, Thursday. I went and scheduled streams for school pickup. I'm a legend. I'm good. I think things through. I need to think things through more. Anyway, so, so heuristics. So I read this book, and it basically, again, it's like one of those things where it's like, yes, absolutely. Okay, so they talk about reality-based, the reality-based community. Forgive me, it's a little early. I'm a bit tired. The reality-based community, and you go, that's great. Okay. What about, and truth seeking? Okay. You don't need to throw out the institutions. And I went, okay. And it just sort of did this fascinating thing where it nudged me along. You know that yes. But then the book started to go in a very strange direction, which was, and it is about the trolls. I will get there. It's more about how to think critically about things, and this arguing about things that are settled whilst ignoring things that are up for and treating things as settled that are up for debate. Like that's something where we're going to get to. And you've had enough streams with me by now to know that I fucking talk shit. But soda water on tap is so good. Anyway. Look at me, fancy cunt. Soda water on tap and everything. Anyway, no, soda streams end up being quite expensive if you drink a lot of soda water. So we got it, and Paul wanted a kegerator thing, so he's got things for the beer, and I've got soda water on tap. It's cheaper. You just add a little bit of Himalayan salt and some like potassium, and you've got like unlimited soda water. It's fantastic. Anyway, side point. So look, so this book, it just kind of nudged me along. It's really interesting. I'm going to actually probably write a review on this once my website's done. Never ending fucking. When that's done, it's actually not too bad. It's actually getting there. But it did this weird flex. And this is something that I've observed with, I think, the IDW in particular. And I can see, and this is one of those sort of, those woke critiques of like people from the IDW. This is one of their critiques, which is that they often re-raise debates that are largely settled. And if they were within sort of the academic community at writ large, right? If they were sort of around the literature, they would know that most things are settled. Like, for example, race science or systemic racism or sexism or, homophobia. The very, in Australia, Indigenous population and their clear disadvantage, the data's out. It's not really up for, and it's not a question of no debate. But what it is that it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that meeting with that person who will just never end the fucking meeting because they've got nowhere else to be. They're just trying to just derail everything. And, they're derailers. Okay, that's a form of trolling as well. Derailing. It's not just harassment and stuff. It's also just fucking playing obtuse in order to suck the time and energy of people, for your own amusement. Which it can be fun if you want to give someone enough rope. Like I like doing that on LinkedIn. Like I just let these guys, I'll just goad them into like, this is funny trolling. I'll goad them into, but this is also why the book triggered me so much. I'll goad them into some sort of, writing paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. And then I'll just goad them a little, get them to write paragraphs, 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 and then I'll just delete it all. So I just honeypot them over with a like stupid, outrageous thing. And then the actually guys, and I'll just sort of back and forth a little bit because they love wasting the time of other people. I was just like, yeah, I'll just goad them into this, have them spend hours writing shit and then just delete it so they don't get the fucking attention. It's fun. This is why the book triggered me. But anyway, but I also know a lot about trolling. Like, Sarah J, you're great on LinkedIn. Yeah, and this is, I'm going to say I have, LinkedIn is hard because a lot of my peers are on it. Okay. So a lot of my peers understand what I'm doing instinctively. But it also is actually kind of related. I hadn't really planned to make it related, but it is kind of related to the trolling thing and to how there's these definitions that they claim are settled around these things. And I go, fucking hell, am I like perceived to be a psychopath? Like this is where I'm going. I go, what the fuck? No, I'm not. That's not how it is. And this is, again, the difference between that sort of, this is why psychology is such a great thing to learn, okay? But also the different schools in psychology, because you'll understand that there's, nature versus nurture. Yeah, most of it's both, okay? The answer to most things in this world is both, okay? Socialism, capitalism, what works best? Both, in different ways, at different times. What doesn't work? Authoritarianism, starving people to death and not paying people a living wage. Things that work and don't work. That's why I tend to focus less on theory and ideology, as much as I try to educate others on theory and apply theory here, okay? Ultimately, theory has to have an application or it's fucking pointless, okay? I was trying to, actually, small tangent, okay? Paul and I were talking about something. What was it? Can't remember. It was something to do with tech stuff. And I was, one thing I know is the difference between manipulation and persuasion. So my husband is slightly spectrumy. And over the years, he's had to learn how to sort of relate to people. A bit like me, we sort of learned it the hard way. Okay. And he's learned a lot in sort of manipulation, persuasion, understanding the difference. He just, learns a lot about people. He's curious about psychology in business and, all that business stuff. He's always been into that. Obviously, manipulation, persuasion, those sorts of things, changing hearts and minds, that's an area of expertise for me. And we can't remember what we were talking about, but it just came up and he just said something as if it was given, and a given, manipulation versus persuasion. And he said, well, the difference between manipulation and persuasion is intent. And I said, well, that's not the case. because you can accidentally manipulate someone. It doesn't make you persuasive. You can unknowingly manipulate. Okay, it's not a matter of just intent. And so what I did, this is what it's like living with me, by the way, is that I said, well, it's not just about intent. And this is what most of the books say, that the difference between manipulation and persuasion is intent. It's not actually that. It's a combination of things. Like everything, it's both, which is that it's not just manipulation, okay? If you intend to manipulate somebody, it's not that, okay? Like the difference between, say, like persuasion and cult programming, or like I posted on LinkedIn this week, tell me why. Oh, that's right. It actually came from this question, which was, tell me how materially recruitment is any different from human trafficking. It's curious. That could be seen as trolling. It's not. It's actually, I go, okay, I'm going to get people thinking about what they do. I go, okay. People think I'm being a cunt, but that's on them. And this is where it becomes a lot more complicated. And this comes back to, what the subject of this thing is. There's a subject. Can't remember what it is right now, but we'll get there. But basically with, like tell me how recruitment isn't technically, on a technicality, human trafficking. You profit from, selling humans. And then I said, there's a lot, you're selling people, okay? You're making money off of the movement of people. And then someone said, well, it's a matter of consent. And I said, well, do people who consent, do people who have to, go through a recruitment pool, like let's say you're going to work at Bunnings, like a retail. They've got recruitment pools, okay, where they don't even bother to give you an interview. What they do is they'll put you in a room with 100 people, screen you for fucking any decent critical thinking qualities, and hire people based on their ability to, take orders and, all that sort of stuff, compliance and fucking all that stuff. And that's for a low-level retail job. They are forced to, in order to eat, okay, and this is fun. In order to eat, okay, and survive, your basic fucking needs, food, shelter, water, clean water, okay? Not even social belonging, okay? But let's talk about your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because I love this shit, because the business people love this fucking pop psychology shit, so I flip it on its head. And this is my point about the role of theory. This is the role of theory. The role of theory is to get you understanding that there are different schools. They're not declarations of law. Ultimately, theory needs to apply to something that, how we live together or whatever. Otherwise, you're off in the fucking clouds thinking about deontological versus consequentialist fucking bullshit. That's not really, it's highly relevant to what I'm talking about now. You can apply it. Okay, so you can apply this stuff. So basically, my argument was, is recruitment human trafficking? Technically. Okay, and people don't even think about it. They just go, oh no, they just don't think. And they go, oh yeah, well technically I do sell people. All right. Technically I profit from, it's exploitative. Okay. Technically, you get what I'm saying? Like you could just, it's just fun thinking. Now, what someone wrote with that was that the difference between recruitment and human trafficking is coercion. And that was where I said, well, okay, well, it's pretty well established that people need to eat and have shelter and need basic needs met. Okay, so if you are forced to engage with a recruiter, I'm not talking about a headhunter or somebody where you've got a choice. I'm talking about the fucking system. If you've ever tried to hand a CV in, even if you're you should see the state of recruitment right now. Even high-level fucking people who are in demand have to go through this dehumanizing, ridiculous process, right? Hang on, let me just adjust that. I know it's a little bright, but the shadows are more fucking offensive to me than the overexposure. So anyway. I need to get fucking primer for the first time in my life. It's basically spack filler for your face. I need to get a better light that like I can is just bigger so that because I don't have this much age on my face, it just looks that way because of the light. And so I'm all fucking I don't actually have that bad jowls, but it looks that way because the light is over here and I need it to be wider and softer. Anyway, whatever. Who gives a fuck? Anyway, so I'll just hook everyone with my looks. Like I've always done. Anyway, so but yeah, so basically anyway, so if you're forced to interact with this recruiter in order to eat and keep a roof over your head, is that not coercion? Like Noam Chomsky did that famous thing where it's like, how is renting a human? Yes, we understand in terms of suffering that it's different. Like people have a lot of absolute answers about these things. It's very interesting, but when you tease it out, they go, oh, okay. This is why learning how to argue, like learning argumentation and learning logic is really good because you can learn to yes and take things to their natural conclusion and have people painted in corners because most people don't think things through. They just say things as if they're, like I said, the thought terminating cliche. They don't think about things. They don't think about the theory behind it. They just take it as a given because our brains are lazy. Okay. Again, that's something that's a theory, but it helps you to understand better. So if you're forced to, in order to survive, in order to eat, okay, and it's proven that, before you can even think, right? Before you can even think about like what your career is, like that is a luxury. And that was actually what I pointed out to this guy. You said, well, we're not being coerced. It's a choice. And I said, well, is it? He's like, oh, well, people careers. And I said, well, that's because that someone who's in the position to choose these things, okay, usually has their basic needs met. And if you are, choice comes after the basic needs. So according to psych theory, your ability to sort of have a higher level of thought and function go beyond survival. Now, Maslow's hierarchy, it has its problems, okay? It's not as linear. It can be, again, some of these things interact with personality factors and all that sort of stuff. But let's just use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs because everyone knows it. Before you can... So is engaging with a recruiter a choice? If your basic needs like food, shelter, sleep, healthcare, if those things are tied to you having to interact with a recruiter, okay, and the choice comes after your basic needs are met, or the ability to think about, or have fair. We've all been in a mode of. I think most people. I've been in a mode of survival fucking my whole life, so I'm a little bit more comfortable with this. I think the last year or two, I think more privileged people have been exposed to what it's like to actually feel like, poor people feel. Even if you're sort of feeling a lot haven't, but a lot haven't really I think people have a maybe slightly better understanding of what it's like to see dick rockets flying when you can't eat. Okay. But I'm just saying, basically, so the order is wrong. You can't just say that choice. It's a choice to act with to engage with a recruiter when acting with a recruiter is how you get your basic needs met. Okay. When choice comes after basic needs being addressed. Okay. And it depends on your definition of choice. And this is something that this is an American thing. They just say, well, choice. What the fuck does that mean? Well, that's the illusion of choice. And this is my beef with Rauch's book, which was that he was talking about the desire for truth and seeking truth. Truth is not an outcome. It's a destination, right? It's a sort of, not a destination, sorry. It's a journey, right? It's something that you should always, it's an orientation, like north, okay? You're heading in that direction. You've got to always be heading towards trying to get to the truth, okay? That was the saying, truth is an orientation, not a destination. But this is what I found really interesting. I'll get back to, so this is where, okay, let me go back to my thought. I'm trying to make sure I stay a little more structured, but I like getting people just thinking about the things that they just take for granted. And I'm not saying we need a fucking philosophy class because there's so many people who are better at it than me. Watch Ben Burgess. Fabulous. Okay. He's way better. He's a philosopher. He's not. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a thinker. Right? I apply things. I consider myself more of an applied. I like to just teach and talk and think. Okay. Sarah said, I'm over 60, so according to Maslow, I should now be at the self-actualization stage. Well, that's the problem with, I think, a lot of that older psych theory is that they mixed up their shit. It's sort of the thing about, anyway, that's a whole thing, but it's not non-linear. Like my growth has been, as a person, I don't think that I'm particularly enlightened. I don't think I'm particularly self-actualized. Probably a little more than others, but I'm still up in, I don't know who, I still don't know where I fit in this world. I don't know what I do. I don't know why I'm of value. I slip into fucking depression an awful lot over, books, stuff like this, where I'm talking and I feel like I'm the only one fucking talking about stuff and thinking. And those that are curious sort of are headed down some weird rabbit hole and written off as conspiracy theorists or bad guys or, but I mean, you got, I think that when you combine something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sorry, my camera didn't, there we go. When you got Maslow's hierarchy of needs and it's like shifts with different life stages. But this is the problem with, people taking theory. There's a theory to back up and justify fucking anything that you want to do. But I think ultimately you also can, anybody can use and utilize a theory, like most Nietzsche and Hitler. Okay. Also, can I just point out that it wasn't Nietzsche that fucking helped Hitler? It was Nietzsche's sister who took his shit. Look at Elizabeth Nietzsche. Interesting. Women can be fucking evil too, guys. Okay. Women aren't saints in history either. Okay. I love that thing where it's like, just because we're written out doesn't mean that we're fucking good guys. Some of the things that, women have enabled over the years are not so fucking good. Anyway, so this recruitment question, it was just an interesting thing. But I was talking to Paul about sort of how theory, this is how you okay. So the recruitment question, and then he turned around and he just said a thing without thinking. He's read it. He's read books on persuasion and manipulation, all those things. He's learned all those things. And he just said it like it was fact. But the difference between manipulation and persuasion is intent. And I said, well, is it? I know, I'm related to a few. But I know some people who don't intend to manipulate. They don't intend, they think they're persuasive. And they think that they are good guys. And they tell themselves that they're doing everything with good intentions. Doesn't mean they're not fucking manipulative. Okay, so I said to Paul, it's like, well, is it manipulative? It can't just be that, because you're not just persuasive if you mean well. Okay, and I think that's part of the reason why tech's fallen the way we've fallen, and user experience and all this stuff was a blind spot, was because a lot of us had good intentions. Like we thought, okay, well, naively, everyone has the same intentions as us. Sorry, I keep drifting and looking over at the monitor because it's like, I should actually minimize that shit. I'll minimize it so I'm not looking at my own face all the time. It's annoying. But so, it's not just that about manipulation, persuasion. It's not just that. It's also about outcome and impact. Okay. And this, again, I know I've kind of gone divergent, but this is where I'm saying that, talking about things as if they're settled, whilst simultaneously acting as though you are a beacon of truth, or you are the reasonable one, or you are logical, or you are the sensible one, or capitalism is the default, men is the default, America is the default. Okay, and it's like, well, no, that stuff is still fucking up for discussion. Why are you discussing something like, IQ and race science? Those things have largely got consensus. Okay, I don't say settled because things are always open. professional consensus around some things. That personality is a combination of genes and environment and structure. Okay. So one area, obviously, that you can see that I'm heading is in political psychology and how people interact with the structures around them and with each other politically. And my area, obviously, academically, is the online part of that. So how people interface with technology and how it affects their politics. There's all that, sounds extremely niche, but again, it's boring if you focus on theory. But if you're talking about the everyday impact or the policy implications or the outcomes or the example, like, is recruitment human trafficking? Technically. And there's a lot of questions to unpack there. And so that was where it became like, okay, well, so, manipulation versus persuasion. Ultimately, intent, and that became, and I had a chuckle because I said, well, yeah, manipulation versus persuasion is intent plus outcome, not either or. And this is that same thing. And I said to Paul, you know how I use big fancy words like deontological versus consequentialism? That's what that is in philosophy. And I said, do you know how many hundreds of years debated over the word ought or should or, what does it mean? That's where learning the body of debate and understanding of complexity of things makes things really cool. But it helps make your decisions better. This is one of those things I think with the culture wars is that they'll attach themselves to these niche terms, which we know why, read my post, is that they'll sort of try to own a slice of that and become an authority on a certain slice, but it's not necessarily something that has an actual meaning. If you're in the discipline or have a broad education, like for me, I'm not only have a lot of knowledge in one discipline, I have a lot of knowledge in about three, right? And so I can cross those things and apply them and go, okay, I should have existed 100 years ago when psychology and politics and economics were still philosophy. I think that's, unfortunately, they've all been siloed. So I just end up in philosophy, but whatever. But I don't claim to be a philosopher either, because I find that philosophers talk shit. I fit somewhere in the middle. But again, this is something where you can just apply a theory, right? I'm just going to block this further. Sorry, just blocking the YouTube spam. Okay, so but what you can do is, so it's just funny to see, but then this guy's just like, no, it's a choice. They're not coerced. I said, well, technically I would say that they are coerced. And he says, well, no, I mean physically coerced. I said, well, how is being starved exposed to the elements? Also, if you're poor and you don't have any money and can't pay taxes or fines or, can't participate in society, you may end up in prison. If you're homeless, you can be arrested and put in jail. How is that not physical coercion? Police are physical coercion. Okay. And he's like, oh, very quiet now, by the way. He disappeared. I wonder why that is. But it's just fun. But okay, so this is because I'm not a big fan of these thought experiments where they are detached from some sort of reality. And that's, I think, the difference between, say, me and an academic sitting behind a desk who's sitting around doing thought experiments around intangible things. And this is one of those things I find a bit frustrating about sort of people like Sam Harris and sort of those, those IDW types, is that a lot of their thought experiments are detached from the impact of what they're saying. So like there's a lot of that race stuff, some of the neurobiology stuff. Yeah. Even gender can be one of those things where we have to remember that there's people involved in this stuff. We have to remember that there's people at the end. And this is why I can't be that, that fully, it's very easy to go, full gender critical and go, no, it's not real, and talk about whether trans is real. Well, trans is real. And again, this will be of the psychological perspective, but also the political one. Okay, from a policy point of view, trans is real because it presents a policy challenge, a policy problem. From a healthcare provider point of view, it presents a problem of care. Whether or not you believe that someone is, it doesn't matter what you believe, okay? When you're in front of a patient or you're in front of, a constituent, they're not, they're not, when you're trying to help a person, I've talked about this before in the context of welfare. They don't give a fuck what you believe. They need help. Okay. And what that help looks like, okay, it may vary from person to person, but you have to, you know, going about doing thought experiments about whether trans is real is sort of, well, first of all, it's useless. Okay. You're not going to win. There's no end game to this that doesn't end in vulnerable people being hurt. Okay. And that's not saying trans is not that. I'm saying this is going to be one of the things I talk about maybe in the next stream about the thinking through the next logical step of what you're talking about. Okay. Not just the thing that using science or using concepts or using these things in ways that once you go maybe 2 or 3 steps down the road are quite heinous. Okay. This is where you need people who are a bit more reasonable in charge. You're not going to get a seat at the table if you're talking about trans not being real. It's just not going to happen. Okay. So you've got someone in distress who has needs. Okay. How do you solve the problem? Okay. I still don't understand. Again, like this feminism even. Theory. Yes, there's data and facts and, there's a lot of empirical evidence to show the disadvantage, systematic disadvantage and violence and domestic violence and male violence. But it's not the only fucking perspective. There's other perspectives. Everything is up for question, okay? But also thinking about the next couple of levels down from those questions and whether those questions come from a good place or a bad place. Again, it's that intent. Okay, your intent might be good, but the impact and outcome is different. It doesn't mean you're not being a cunt. It doesn't mean you're not manipulating. It doesn't mean that what you're saying doesn't have a very real outcome. Now, trolling, back to this. So, Constitution of Knowledge. So I read this book and it was like, yeah, okay, democratic principles, pluralism, great, okay. He defended institutions. Now, that's where he started to lose me, okay. And I started to get a little bit like, and again, I had to explore whether this was about being triggered, okay, so to speak, because this book triggered me. It actually fucking upset me. It made me really upset. Mostly because I think that if you're a woman of any age and brain capacity, okay, you may notice that there's a lot of men who enjoy gaslighting women. And I don't mean in an abusive sense. Again, intentions can be good. This is the end result. Into thinking that they are crazy, that the men are the rational ones, that, if women just, that women have an equal playing field in the workplace, if only we just tried harder, if only we would lean in or watch the way we speak. And, that civility gaslighting that I've talked about this before, and I'm going to write about it a little bit more because it fucking gets on my tits. And that's one of the things with these IDW types, right? And again, I say types. It's just, these are very broad, loose internet tribes. It's I'm not talking about anyone in particular, but these guys that just, they talk about things that are contested as though they're settled, and talk about things that have consensus as though they're up for debate, and it's very strange. Okay, and there's an intellectual inconsistency with that fucking gets on my nerves, because these guys are the ones claiming. These are the ones that are defending institutions. These guys are the ones that are defending power. They're defending economic structures. They're defending, patriarchy and capitalism and all these concepts of structures, right? All these frameworks. People of color, right? Systemic racism. And to turn around and say, well, we fixed racism, or, racism was over with the civil rights movement in America, or women now have equal access to middle management jobs where they can compete so long as they don't have children, or, or have a nanny or have a cleaner and have all of these other things. And that was the thing that got me fucking annoyed, which is that idea of access, because he was arguing for institutions. So established institutions. Again, that's a good thing. Things that come from, we've got to learn from the past, because history, obviously, not a lot of this isn't new. Okay, I was talking to somebody on Twitter the other day where it was basically like, these people that correct spelling errors don't realize that, and then people just go, oh well, spelling English, the spelling and grammar and all of those things have been largely settled. And I go, well, who settled it? And they go, what do you mean? The scholars. What scholars? Do you know who settled universal spelling? The typesetters. So with the printing press, in order to save money, because you had to make plates, okay, they needed some uniform way of printing people's words. Up until then, people just spelt things how they sound and how they felt they sounded. And also what I find funny is that I love using John Stuart Mill and and Shakespeare as examples, which is that John Stuart Mill, if you read his original my brain's not working. John Stuart Mill's book, the original, littered with fucking different like spellings and stuff. They were all just free and loose. As long as they were understood and they were getting their ideas across, that that it didn't really matter. It was actually typesetters and capitalism and commercial interests that actually determined that there needed to be uniformity and structure. And that's what and this is the same thing with universities. We're seeing that sort of corporate, I mean, as much as it's just stressful studying psych, okay, because it's not what it used to be. A lot of the interesting part of psych has been stripped out of it, but what it is now is production of fucking experimental research. And yes, it's very useful, like, and I'll tell you about that, because it gives us some data, which is great, but it's not the only thing either. Okay, this is where capitalism takes over thinking. Anyway, that's a side point. But this is where these guys, they just take these things as settled, like these institutions. I go, well, hang on a minute, you're leaving parts out about this stuff as well. But what you're doing is the difference between these logic sort of liberalism. Those people that are like in defense of liberalism, okay? Let's unpack that, okay? Because most people who are versed in political philosophy, especially socialist philosophy and anarchy and those sorts of things, believe that liberty is not at odds with socialism. This is something that just Americans manufactured and cooked up. In terms of history, most socialist movements, okay, haven't been authoritarian, other than the fact that government programs, it depends on your definition of that, but redefining things, coupling like liberalism with democracy, okay? But not only that, not satisfied with that, marrying neoconservatives' version of liberalism to democracy, okay? Marrying American neoliberal capitalism with free market. These are all up for debate. They're all contested. And that's why this book, it wound me up. And I think it just felt like every gaslighting exercise that has ever happened, that I've ever had with these fucking guys that go, don't talk like that. Had someone say, this is how the world works. I'm 42 years old. I know how the world, and I'm pretty well, I know how the fucking world works. You can't. Those men, okay, actually, because I have the backing and might of all of these institutions, because of the fucking appendage in my groin and this colour of my skin and my economic situation and status, that's how it is. It's settled. If you don't like it, you can stop complaining and be civil. Would you be civil, please? Like, what the fuck? That's what that was. This civil discourse stuff. Yeah, there's a time and a place for things. But this book fucking wound me up. Okay. Exactly. So Tetris Toast. I'm sorry the chats aren't working. I need to troubleshoot why that is. I'm going to switch streaming software again. But Tetris Toast said, life is less exciting if everything is settled. Where's the room to move, to improve? Actually, exactly. Like they just, And this was my frustration. And the problem is that I really wanted to like this book because I actually quite like Rauch's work. I like, I do tend to err on the side of, reason and evidence. I also believe that not everything is answered by science, and not everything is answered, especially now in 2022, where there's a lot of economic, interest in the pursuit of knowledge. I can't get a PhD in my area because there's no political. I think anybody who works in sort of politics or science or any of these areas where, you're relying on data, very, very well that it's very unlikely that you're going to get funded for research unless there is a commercial use for it. Okay, that's just how it is. And unfortunately, mine tends to be anti-commercial, and that's why I know these gender studies things, aren't just for fucking naught. Okay, it's obvious that it's a combination of demand being met because of a generation of kids who grew up on Tumblr, okay, who had demand for these courses and wanted to do them, and they're dumb as shit and rich as fuck. So let's give them something to like chew on. Let's give them a chew toy and take $150,000 from their parents and make them alumni, and so that we've got donors for life. That's how it's obvious when you understand the American, academy, and also because they're heavily influential, and so you get to a point where you plant the seed of authority, and suddenly Judith Butler's authoritative in every field, but it's not. It's just fucking AstroTurf bullshit. And then you can see how commercial interests might nudge that research in certain directions in order to, people are going to go where the grants are. And if Pharma happens to be offering the grants through one of their various front groups, then so be it. Okay, I don't see that as particularly controversial. I think if you think it's controversial, then you're not thinking, and you don't know history, and you don't know, anyway. So, but this is the problem with gaps in research, especially with research being highlighted. First of all, so he argues, what he argued was, first of all, for pluralism, okay? So this idea of open source. He used Wikipedia as a good example of that, okay? And Wikipedia is a great example of crowdsourcing. But he didn't really dig very deep into the other side of things, which is that who has the time and resources and education and access to things like to be able to spend 8 hours a day for free in a volunteer capacity on Wikipedia, okay? And this is where and also just, it's very heavily Americanized. Also, we also know that Wikipedia, it can be fucking gamed, but, it's pretty good. It's as good as anything else that's, on the internet and open to wreckage. And corporate forces and corporate interests, right? Marketing campaigns and all that, PR campaigns and all that sort of stuff. Again, that reputation management firms always edit your Wikipedia and stuff. They try to do that all the time. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, so he defended that sort of, many eyes, open source, like many eyes on something is generally more accountable than, say, a handful of commercial ones, right? That's, pluralism, that's fine. That's how it works. Different interests compete and, work together in good faith to try and achieve an outcome. Cool. But what about those who can't do that? What about those who can't, with no arms and no legs, who can't type? No, I'm just being smart. But, what about women? Okay. And he said, well, basically what you need to do is state your case civilly. State your case civilly. And I went, okay, cool. So you're saying exactly what every other man has said to me whenever I've asked for help with domestic labour or access to childcare or working from home so that I can, balance both, or anything that actually, and if I got angry about it or upset or frustrated, I was, called uncivil or negative. And there comes a point where civility just doesn't work. And there's a whole school of thought around Civility is good to a point, but when it doesn't work or it excludes you, like I've been excluded from those institutions forever. Okay, I've already decided that I'm probably not going to be able to register as a clinical psychologist because of my mouth, so there's no point. Okay, there's people like that all around the world in varying ways who don't have access to these fucking rooms that have mostly dicks in them, and now former dicks, with one or two women, and those one or two women who do make it have hindsight bias because usually they're in higher socioeconomic status. Usually they have, family connections and they own their house because they've had various help, or, there's very, very, very few self-made poor women. Okay, there's very few. There's no such thing as self-made, but I'm saying someone who has bootstrapped their way, because every woman compared to men, okay, the women who they call self-made are usually rich, okay, or have social supports like, childcare, or don't have children at all, or, and they tend to ceiling out at about 50, at about 50 in their career before they start having job insecurity. They have less superannuation, they have less retirement money. This is data too, okay? Women have much fewer opportunities than men to progress in careers. We usually tap out at the middle, and by the time we get to this age of like 40s and 50s, we are so fucking exhausted, we go fuck it, and we become a little bit grumpy and rude on Twitter. Okay, so this is where there's that gaslighting, right? Now, again, I'm not going to talk too much about theory. I actually like to just talk about how theory sort of how we interact with theory in everyday life. I find that more interesting, because obviously the second you start talking about boring shit, everyone gets bored. That's why it's called boring shit. Okay, I like to make things more interesting. But then what he did, so he sort of nudged a bunch of premises along the way. So it was like, okay, well, let's defend institutions. Yes, I agree. I think that there does need to be some truth seeking and a process, and, there needs to be gates around things. Things need to be not, deliberately disruptive. Okay. But what he then did was he went into sort of this fake news discussion, and he went into conversations about the internet. And this is what happens every single fucking time someone wanders off lane into internet stuff, which is that they don't understand. Okay. Now, I'm sure he took the time to understand it. Now, I'm going to note that this guy quotes Sam Harris an awful lot for someone who claims to be seeking lots of different truths. Just say it. No big deal on, I'm fucking 50-50 on Sam Harris. I'm neutral on him, right? Whatever. He does what he does. But he then started to, so first of all, he said, okay, well, what we need is the constitution of knowledge, which is basically, if we base it on the best constitution in the world, the most democratic constitution in the world, the United States Constitution. Wait a minute. I've got follow-up questions. As I've said before, I've got some follow-up questions. It says God exists in the Constitution of America. Is that truth? It also says that all men are created equal, which is great and true, but you're not applying it. Are you? Okay. Also, the idea of liberty, when that constitution was drafted, okay, the concept of liberty was way broader than the American definition, okay, of your right to beg on the street for fucking barely living wage and be homeless in your car while having 3 jobs. That's not freedom. Sorry, guys. Okay. American system is built on on laissez-faire economics. Now, if you've read David Grieber's work, you'll know I'm quoting him. But this, this invisible hand idea from Adam Smith literally meant the hand of God. It was referring to some sort of invisible hand that would fix. It was self-correcting because God would fix it. That truth-seeking. But then he turns around and is like, okay, he also doesn't, with the book, it's like, okay, well, what about Australia? What about Australia's lack of Bill of Rights? So here is an important part of history with Australia, which is that because we established our federation later than that of the US with the Republic, we were able to gather and learn. So what we did was the founding fathers of Australia actually took the best of both. They took common law, that heavy dependence on British common law, okay, and precedent, and the two, the bicameral houses of parliament, two houses of parliament, okay, and so there's sort of, the sort of House of Lords and the Westminster system. And then they took the idea of Congress and the Senate and the Federation, and they borrowed parts from the United States and they borrowed parts from the UK. And what they did was they had a discussion about, all these fucking Australia's fallen dumb fucks who are like, Australia's fallen, they don't have a Bill of Rights, they're fucked. You know what? We discussed it. We discussed having a Bill of Rights, and they decided that it was actually a bad idea. And so what's different between American culture, which is it's very prescriptive when it comes to law. Okay, so they legislate and legislate and legislate. That's why they have so many fucking elections. Everything is fucking, everything is litigated. Anyway, it's exhausting. It's fucking exhausting. And I think counterproductive, if I'm honest with you. It's not fucking necessary. Because Australia, the way that Australia designed our political system was learning from dysfunction in America. Learning that their Bill of Rights was something that people latched onto and took literally, and it had egregious shit in it, and it was a really good way to have shit in it that you didn't want in there, okay? So they had this discussion and debate, and what the Australian Federation did, because again we're a federation like America, you got different states, different laws, different levels of different criminal codes. We've got different criminal codes. From state to state, things are very disparate, and the states are the default. The states have default power. So Australia is very much about the federal government having limited power as possible. It is the bare amount. This is convention. So, UK law and UK politics is very much guided on convention, norms, that sort of stuff. America, there's some convention, but a lot of it is because everything is fucking up for dispute all the time. They go, fucking hell, we got to write this down and we got to fight over it for 10 years, even though the rest of the world has figured this shit out already. That's America. It's great. They have the debates and die in the ditches no one else will die in. It's good. However, but this claim that, and this is where, again, that's just from the beginning of the book, basing the Constitution of Knowledge on the idea and the premise that the United States Constitution is the superior fucking constitution. There's plenty of constitutions around the world that are fairer. Like again in Australia, New Zealand, there's all sorts of places. I'm not going to say Russia and those things, but there's lots of different things we can learn from everywhere. But it seemed to me like this whole book was about learning from the guys who have always been telling us that shit's settled when it's not fucking settled, and it's very much for them and not for us. And that's how I sort of felt. I felt this sort of simmering and brewing as I read the book. But what happened was, then he started to say, well, your identity doesn't matter in the reality-based community. And I went, well, it fucking does if you're being left out. Okay. What about people? Okay, so what you're saying is that in order to participate in a reality-based community, even if you're someone like me who, is pretty open-minded, I will, if I hear a debate and I'll read it, if I see something that challenges me, I'll go and look at the literature. I'm truth-seeking. I would not be in the reality-based business because I get pissed off at the gaslighting, and I felt gaslit because he was saying that these institutions matter, these institutions are important. We must put the work in. Truth is a part-time job. That's what he said. Well, what if I've already got 3 fucking part-time jobs in the form of literal part-time jobs, a full-time job plus children plus fucking husband plus this plus community plus church plus all these fucking things you think I should be doing for free plus streaming and all this other content creation. So what you're saying is that in my spare 15 minutes a day, I'm supposed to be writing polite civil essays up against a guy who's got 12 hours a day to fucking sit and argue on the internet. Is that what you're saying? Okay, well, that sounds like an issue to me. I object. I've got follow-up questions there. How am I supposed to conduct myself? The reason I use Twitter and the reason I say what I say and the reason why I misbehave is because it's pretty persuasive. And that's where I got triggered. So, this book, he turned around and he basically said, well, the internet has made it so that anyone can say anything. Yeah. And they did that. And he did acknowledge that this has happened before. You know, there's a lot of junk and the yellow journalism, all that sort of stuff. Again, I'm saying I wanted to agree with this book. I wanted to like it. But I didn't. I fucking just found it, just wound me up. And again, I need to explore why I found that, because there's a big part of it that might be sunk costs, which is where I might be wrong, which is that I might. So he basically said that shit posters, trolls, he lumped them all in together because of course he fucking did, okay? Mr. Truth-seeking, who likes the empirical data and all of the evidence and has a book writing about how things need to be based on evidence, lumped disinformation, misinformation, trolling, shitposting on Twitter, humour on Twitter, blogging, all of these like clickbait journalists, he cast them all with the same brush as illegitimate. And this was something that because I actually, as you know, I use Twitter threads because I can back that, which is that Twitter is where the fucking shit's happening. So if you're not there, it's like being on the battleground and you're the Red Cross. You can fucking patch people up one by one, walk up one by one. You maybe don't have enough power to sort of engage in negotiations in the war, but you can be on the ground with bandages and water and food and, try to persuade people and nudge people in the opposite direction away from the crazy shit. I can back that. That is backed in data and science, which is that if people are there and you can be gentle and persuasive and sometimes, again, shake them out of their shit. That's why I do what I do and say things in the way that I say them. There's a method to what I do. There's a process, and it's backed in data and it's backed in truth and it's backed in what works. And so to have this guy just turn around and instantly turn and call someone like me illegitimate, I kind of have always worn it like a badge of honor, but at the same time, I actually got rocked by this because I was like, well, I can't believe, and that's why it came back to the LinkedIn thing where it's like, well, are my intentions not clear here? Do people think I'm stupid and a troll and a psychopath? And that was the next premise. So again, something else that's up for debate. Okay, so the institutions are great up until they're completely fucking bought by American corporations. We've seen this time and time again where this woke shit is a corporate fucking campaign to get people to disclose mental health problems, disclose all the shit that employers can't ask. Also, it makes them look like they're doing something without doing anything at all. It's fucking, it's it's quite obvious what this woke shit is. Okay, it's useful. Okay, and it's also a useful weapon for anyone who wants to try and, let's say, create a new emerging market of lifetime surgical patients and hormones and drugs. Okay, it's not root cause. Gee, what else ignores root cause and tries to sell people fucking salves? Oh, mate, capitalism. You can't criticize wokeism without critiquing capitalism. If you're not critiquing capitalism in your analysis of this woke stuff, you're wrong. Marxist analysis, Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky's analysis, and a number of other fucking, they easy. Nothing in history. It's easy. Settled. Monsanto. Big oil. Fucking basic shit. Okay. So, but what I say isn't useful. What I say doesn't radicalize. What I say de-radicalizes. What I say makes people look into the eye of the sun. And that's why it won't be heard. And that's why I'm like, okay, you find me, you find me. You pay me, you pay me. I have to accept that being right and truthful in this instance is being broke. and not getting a book deal and not getting the things that those men get, because those men support the same narratives, the truth-based business. Here's the truth. Okay. Even though the data is that a combination of socialism, social programs take the edge off capitalism, that capitalism and austerity are an abject failure in terms of fucking macroeconomic and you know, the fucking monetary policy of the United States is a failure. Consensus. Again, there's consensus on this between most economics who aren't in the fucking cult. All right. And now, again, I'm not saying that the debate shouldn't be had. I'm saying it should be always out loud. But there's a point where they're derailing and they're making the meeting go on too long because they've asked a question that they've asked 100 times and we've gone, no, we agree. It doesn't work. We've done it before. We're not trying it, Sharon. So Tetris Toe said woke capitalism and cui bono goes hand in hand. I don't know what cui bono means. I'll have to look that up. Tell me what it means. See, again, being willing to admit when you don't. That's another thing that frustrates me about a lot of these guys is that they present themselves with confidence and authority and like they know things. And then they kind of just present themselves and authorities of things and they never say they don't know something. They always have to save face and pretend that they go, yep, like Tim Pool, fuck me. Anyway, free, okay, yeah, who benefits? That's what so who benefits? Okay, yep. Sorry, I haven't heard cui bono before. I know what, obviously, who benefits and there are no allies only interests. I just haven't heard that particular thing before. See? We don't know everything. And this is that thing where some logic bro will go, well, you didn't know this niche fucking thing. And it's probably not niche. It's probably just not been within my, realm of attention. And I tend to not really know colloquialisms for things. I know the theory stuff, but and I also have trouble with word recall as well. It's just the way my brain works so fast. Anyway, spoonerisms are my favorite fucking things. Anyway, you've watched me long enough to know this. The principle that the ultimate initiator of an action is likely he who stands to gain from the action. Yeah, exactly. So, it came from the United States universities. So the United States universities benefit. Okay, this is not difficult. How might they that's actually, thank you for that, cui bono. I knew other stuff, but I didn't know that. But again, how do you apply it? Okay, well, this is not hard thinking. This isn't like debates over like impenetrable big word bullshit. This is easy. This is an easy thing to think about. Okay, so before you get to the hard stuff, like I fucking laugh when Tim Pool's like the deontological versus consequentialist fucking debate. And I go, you don't know what that means. How about you work on what socialism is first? How about that? That's easy. That's easier than that. The other one, that's kind of boring. And first of all, it's a distraction and fucking derailing. And that's what logic bros do, is they just go off on a rabbit hole and distract. It's a diversion. Okay, it's a distraction. Red herring, right? In philosophy, it's called a red herring, right? Among other things. It's fallacy. Even if you're using philosophical words, it's still fallacious to bring up obscure theories and derail people from their overall point. So, sorry, hang on. We seem to have a bit of a spam problem. Hang on. I've got to manually block people. So, what was I going to say? Yeah, so this is what it just wound me up, because there's a lot of people who just take what these guys say and that they're also thought-terminating cliches. And again, I'm sure Jonathan would have something to say because he believes in this conversation, so he would be open to this criticism. But this is a common blind spot. But to turn around and say that identity doesn't matter when you center identity, and identity's too loaded. Socioeconomics, okay? That's something where there's pretty much a lot of consensus on, which is the data around socioeconomic status. Okay, we can talk about identity. That's irrelevant. It's a distraction. Haggling over the definition of words is a distraction. But what we can look at is the things that are largely known. that systemic racism is still alive and well in the US, that sexism is still alive and well, as we all fucking experience, that bots are a problem on Twitter, that, trolls are a problem, disinformation is a problem. Disinformation is different from misinformation. Those things are different. Sometimes the definitions matter. In that sense, it does. Because what's happening is that everything is being lumped in as disinformation or misinformation, and misinformation, disinformation is a matter of intent and also the nature. So misinformation is when you're misled. You don't know. You just you kind of just, again, you're just sharing things. Okay, trans women are women is misinformation. Okay, you're sharing something on behalf of someone else. Okay, without really thinking about it. It feels true. You think it's true. Misinformation is probably, the fake news sort of, and then you've got the sort of disinformation, which is that deliberate, falsehoods, deliberate fake news, which is slightly different, where there is a matter of, where you're sharing things that are just lies. Now, I would argue that the American government is the main fucking perpetrator of most disinformation. And that was the thing, that if you are being truth-seeking and looking at data and looking at evidence, okay, that they are, it's what they leave out. It's always what people leave out that's the most interesting. And he left this part out. He threw lip service to it. He sort of talked around the edges about journalists, and fact checking. And he sort of, he played around the edges, but he didn't look into the eye of power. And everyone who gets these book deals, everyone who gets the fucking resources to do their content, everyone who gets all the YouTube followers and subscribers and paid, all that stuff, everyone who gets that doesn't look into the eye of the sun. They play around the edges. They're sitting on the moon, figuratively and literally. Well, and literally. I don't know. Not literally. I don't know. Fucking whatever. But they're all, they're chipping away at the edges and they're nibbling. But they never, ever go into the power center, which is the fucking gaslighting, violent history of the imperialist United States. The fact that they have been in an information war, an aggressive information war, spent trillions and trillions, imagine spending trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. That's quite the compliment to Marx, isn't it? That they spend so much money, so many resources, so much time dedicated to defaming and libeling one man's ideas. It's interesting, isn't it? When you think about it that way, you go, that's a fucking backwards compliment if ever there was one. But anyway, but this is the thing with these books where then he just went, okay, so he lumped all that in together for a start. And yes, the argument is that with this constitution of truth, that people who are experts in their field, okay, would be able to correct this, would be able to correct him. But he positioned himself as the person who was talking about the constitution of truth in a book filled with a lot of holes and bullshit. And I thought that, and this is stuff that was easy to question, easy to fact check. He didn't even fact check himself. So then what he did was he actually called, and this is the trolling part, okay? And this is why I sit there and I go, holy shit, this is why people think I'm a troll, because they're just, there's this dominant is probably the word that I'm thinking of, okay? Dominant narrative, okay? So I've been around long enough. The internet's been around long enough for there now to be a generational fucking gap too, okay? Which is that, like as much as there's a boomers, millennials, Gen Z gap, there's original internet and new internet and corporate internet like gaps as well, in terms of there's a culture clash and those, things that were not delivered on, and things that I know that other people who are 10 years my junior don't, or 10 years my junior in internet years, right? Could be the same age and most people were still 10 years behind. But trolling had a specific meaning, okay? So in the old school days, trolling was fun. It was funny. It was, people. Why do people troll? Okay, people troll for many different reasons. That's why I've actually I've had to back away from that term because it was co-opted. Now, a friend of mine committed suicide over this very conversation. Okay, which was that she did not she was a celebrity who was, who would try to fight and engage with trolls. Okay. And I would just say to her, look, they're just having a bit of fun. You're a cardboard cutout of yourself. You're not yourself. Don't read that stuff. You don't need to. They're not having a go at you. They are there's a big part in trolling research, okay, which is that those that engage in harmless trolling, okay, again, this is up for debate what this stuff means, which is that the history of trolling was that it was usually good-natured, usually to make a point. Sometimes it was just not to make a point and just to derail and be, destructive. But it also, trolling is a big part of, cybersecurity and penetration testing now, and social engineering in terms of like testing security, which is that you go in and you try to see if you can implode the community and see if you can do the forum sliding and see if you can take it over. That has formed that, trolling has not been given enough credit in terms of its contribution to the internet. And what I've seen now is that people are creating this definition, especially, again, this is what comes back to schools of thought and psychology. This is why I tend to gravitate more towards sort of positive psychology rather than this fucking, pathology and the DSM-5 and, those things. Yes, they're useful if you need insurance. But, in terms of the politics of DSM-5, that's very based in capitalism. There's a lot of Marxist psychologists that can't replicate like psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissistic personality disorder, borderlines. They can't replicate personality disorders in a socialist environment. They can't replicate it. Okay. And this was a lot of and these guys have been memory holed. These Russian Marxist psychologists have been memory holed and replaced by this capitalism as default. Again, people stop looking at the root cause. They take things as true when they're not necessarily settled. Okay. And that was my frustration, was because this next leap was to talk about how trolls are sociopaths who don't care about the rules, who are, high on psychopathy scales and high on narcissistic personality disorder. And those have quite specific meanings. Unless you're this is one other thing. Unless you're I shouldn't be talking about it because I'm only trainee. But I'm saying but you shouldn't be diagnosing people or talking about personality disorders anywhere outside of a clinical context where you know the power of those words and you know the power of that fucking label, okay? Saying those things has a lot of power, and turning around and saying in a book with all these guys who are already empowered enough to gaslight women and tell them to behave themselves and tone police women and say, stop swearing, behave yourself. You get to a certain point as a woman in your career where you know that no matter how much you do, no matter how much you behave, you're not in it. And that's the thing, is that they don't realize that when you're uncivil, that's you as somebody who has not been part of the system. Okay. Did my light fall in front of the lens? Sorry, that's the problem with fucking stream things falling in front. Oh, no, it didn't. Okay, good. But you see where I'm saying is like these books. And like James Lindsay's book is another one I'm very critical of, because he just leaves a lot out. Geopolitics, that, like he tells a story that isn't even, it allows you to fill in gaps if you're a conspiracy theorist, rather than if you're leaving out capitalism, then, you're ignoring the whole fucking problem, which is it came out of fandoms. There's a demand from the market. This is why I need the fucking thing open, even if it's distracting. My fucking loop's cacked up. No, but if you're not looking into the sun, in the eye of the sun, and looking at root cause, honestly, if I end up published, I'd be asking how I'm useful at this point. If I end up being approached to write a book, or this is why I can't take I haven't been offered it, but I'm saying why I wouldn't necessarily take corporate money for anything around this work, because I would want to know how I'm useful, how I am politically useful. Because I'm no longer politically useful. That's why it's not there, right? But again, we need to ask about, and this is where these guys, a lot of the postmodern people and the people who are actually good faith, most academics are pretty good faith, outside of America, I mean, they question this and they go, yeah, fuck America, corporate interests. Okay, it's always been the case. And there's a lot of academics that question this, and they know that like hacks like Jordan Peterson and people who are inflammatory like Gad Sad. And I mean, I'm on the fence about Gad Sad, but, you know, these guys have gaps, but their gaps are useful because they can make a compelling case for things that feel true and make things settled that aren't necessarily settled, like in Gad Sad's case. Rational choice theory has largely been, again, with psychologists, largely fucking, I wouldn't say debunked, I hate it, because you don't debunk, but there's consensus that rational choice theory is shit. Well, first of all, shitty view of humanity, and second of all, not really true, not workable, and that people don't make rational choices, that they make choices from emotions and rationalize later. Again, they say these things that like they're settled, and that's the thing where when it says, what does it mean to be a troll? How long have I haven't got I don't know how long I've been live for. How long, what does it mean to be a troll? And this book is being touted by mainstream press as important, and that we must defend the truth, and that we must go through a process of inquiry and critique and, learn from history and all those things. Well, I'm doing that. And what I'm saying is that right now, you're saying that the American Constitution is the only good fucking thing, and that should be a thing that models, okay? That American liberal democracy is pluralism, which it isn't, okay? You live in a military dictatorship, fucking, and I would say in the early stages of fascism. Some would say further along. I would say that the environment is set for fascism to rise, and it has been for some time. And I would say that there is a deadlock in the government that looks very, very much like the Weimar Republic. But we also know that America tends to fucking, hang on the edge of cliffs a lot and like somehow build a parachute on the way down. They've always done it that way. That's America. We love them for that, right? But when you're critiquing America politically, you go, well, no, you're not the default. We have God in our Constitution too. Okay? I wouldn't say that's a fucking truth-based fucking inquiry either. I'm not saying God's not real. I'm saying you're making a fucking declaration based on faith that isn't true, and that's not truth-seeking. So to turn around and say that yours, anyway, I've gone back on the fucking thing. Same shit. But then trolls. So first of all, lumped in disinformation, misinformation, which is a stupid thing to do because they're different things. He just called it all, everyone who's in it, psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists. Now, I'm going to talk about the evidence. Now, I'm also going to talk about the fact that they've written out the theory of comedy around this stuff and humour. So there's a whole school of thought. I wish I had 5 lifetimes. There's a whole, and anyone would read what I say. But I've decided that my role in this world is to read shit so you don't have to, and try to get you to read more. And also not silo the academy and journals and research from the rest of the world. It's not, there's a stuff I try to, try to distill stuff. But there's a whole school of thought around the psychology of humor. Okay, it's really interesting stuff, and a lot of it is, like there's every single discipline in psychology. So you've got lots of different things. Hang on, you got behavioral psychology, you got biological psychology, you got personality psychology, social psychology, cognitive sciences. It's becoming very dominated by cognitive sciences, which is boring as batshit. You got the experimental, you got social psychology, political psychology, cyber psychology. All of these, occupational psychology. In other words, how to get people to fucking have your idea like it's their own idea under capitalism. Good use of fucking knowledge. But you've also got, dark psychology and all those other things. But there is a school of humor psychology. And what's really interesting is that again, there's parts of history that are left out around the internet, which is trolling and the role of trolling. Now, trolling I think what's actually happened here, again, is that they've taken the word, defined it, and declared it settled. That's what's happened again with the word troll. Now, my friend who killed herself, right? She was a public figure, and we'd have this conversation frequently, okay? She just couldn't fucking reconcile. She had depression, she obviously It wasn't the online. It was just a number of different factors lead to these things, right? And the way that the media ran it was that trolls killed her, right? It's like that's not what happened. She couldn't understand what trolling is, and that troll. There's a number of different things. So there is a very small portion of trolls who are sort of sociopaths. Okay, of course, there's a small portion of everybody who is. Okay, there's a small portion of the population who are psychopaths. Now, again, these things aren't settled, which is that unless you talk about capitalism and you look and at socialist, and you see that there's lower rates and that these things are not often replicated in countries outside of, where people are looked after, and that there's yeah, and so Tetra, this is where I'm going. So he just said, basically he said that trolls are and disinformation, they're all Russian. See, he also plugged Russiagate, which fucking uncritically, which made me laugh, because that's like, what the fuck? And also, like, this was someone who's like, everyone is saying is defending truth. And it's like, what truth? Fox News' Truth and Balance? Like, what the fuck? So it was just like, okay, so yeah, I'm sorry that the stream's been this long and it took me this long to get to the point. But, people watch, don't watch, whatever. I got to get there. I'm thinking stuff through, and I'm sure you don't mind that. But it's, but he basically said, well, okay, the consensus is that trolls are psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissistic. They have personality disorders. I went, well, did you know? I got a follow-up question. I got some questions. They might be rude too. Unfortunately, because I'm supposed to be civil, I can't just say you're a gaslighting fuckwit. I have to say, well, actually, guess what? It's contested. First of all, you don't know the history of trolling, okay? Oh, that's an ad hominem attack. You need to be passively removed. See, this is the thing that annoys me about civility. This is what pisses me off about these fucking civility people, is that they're always posh, white, fucking like Western people who want everyone who is like, it's symbol of like upper class, okay? You can't be someone who's just pissed off because you've just called them a psychopath. I'm not allowed to be upset that someone called me a fucking sociopath and made me wonder if everyone thinks I'm a fucking psychopath now. I'm not allowed to be mad about that. I've got to be rational. And if I'm going to defend myself in a rational manner, I need to dedicate 6 weeks. I was on journals, okay, for the last 4 days looking up the literature. He's wrong, by the way. But looking up the literature on this stuff to make sure that I wasn't incorrect, okay? That takes time and work and money that most people don't have, resources. What do? They Google. Okay, this is why this is a problem with censorship, because this will be the next stream is what I'm planning about this thing. Where do the curious go now without being funneled into some sort of narrative or bullshit? And that's the fucking dangerous path. Because if you Google the psychology of trolling, you get fucking articles of Psychology Today, all those things that say that trolls are psychopaths, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you where that came from, because what happens is with the journal scene. So this is consensus building, and this is how he talks about consensus and truth seeking, and it's always hijacked. But again, he never talked. He did again. Nibbles at the edges. Always nibbles at the edges, which is that it can be misused. But it was misused by Russia and China, right? This is misused by the media. Misused by these, the woke fucking media. It's rules. It's like they're all doing it. But he did this thing where it was just like, okay, so I went and surveyed and I went, okay, well, what's this? So what they've done is in the school that buys the premise of personality disorders. Now, remember, not everyone buys those, okay? Anyone with psych training knows that personality disorders are useful toolkits to help with treatment at best. And they're a code, a code to get fucking funding from insurance companies in America. They're useful. They're fucking political. And any feminist will tell you how political being fucking labelled borderline for being an assertive woman is, or being labelled crazy, or hysterical, or all those things. This is just another version of fucking hysteria. But now everyone is. You can't say women are hysterical, so now you just say that anyone who does things differently to me is fucking hysterical and a fucking psychopath. That's the new hysterical. Is anyone who's different from me is a psychopath or a narcissist. Now, the research is that in personality factors, okay, in terms of personality factors, there's a thing called the dark tetrad or dark triad, right, in psychology, which is Machiavellianism, narcissism, sadism, and psychology. So, yeah, they cluster. There's sort of those serious fucking things, okay? So that's sort of your dark triad, you know, serial killers, psychopaths, you know, people who like lack empathy, whatever the fuck that means, okay? I'm of the view that people who say people lack empathy are those who are trying to manipulate, because most people do have empathy, okay? Most people are capable of empathy. And again, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, well, once you understand things like dissociation and trauma and having trauma-informed stuff, anyway, whole other thing. I'll talk to Jessica Taylor at some point when I get my interviews going and sort of podcast going about trauma-informed therapy and her view on personality disorders. Really fucking, she's doing amazing work. I've talked about it before. This is not settled. But, so, what this was, in the research, and this is where data can be misused, okay? Rather than, if you're using the data to reach conclusions that aren't informed by philosophy and you know, other views of humanity. This is why that multidisciplinary stuff is really important, because you need to be able to, I think this is one of my unique abilities, is to zoom out and then zoom in and then zoom out and then zoom in and sort of see, like, you know, that's what this stuff is. If you're sitting here saying, now, unfortunately, because we're in, and he was defending specialization. Funny that. Do you know who else made people specialize? Hitler. What he did. It's how he did it. And that's what I find, again, really fucking interesting, because he basically did this whole thing about this, you know, the alt-right, again, real thing, real pathway, radicalization, real problem. However, it's a mental health thing. However, okay, it's a very complicated thing. But he just puts these alt-right, he just takes this premise, like they're all alt-right. And then he goes, well, what Hitler did was use humor and comedy and memes and you know, all of that sort of stuff. And he wrote about it in Mein Kampf. Therefore, that's a fucking weird reason. Because do you know who else also does that? Comedians. No, but actually, and it was just so bizarre, because this book was supposed to, everyone's celebrating it like it's some master thing of truth and reality. I'm like, what? You hang on, you called all trolls sociopaths and psychopaths. You ignored the comedic part. You ignored all of the school of positive psychology that tells people that we should be focusing less on pathologization of personality factors and difference, because a lot of it's genetic and the rest of it is a combination of genes plus fucking negative life experience, trauma, systems. This is fucking like, if you're even remotely not scrambled eggs in the head and coming out of fucking American, like, you know, Ivy League fucking like propaganda factories, this is what's really cool about psychology going full science, okay? It used to be a branch of philosophy, but we're now putting it more into sort of hard, I find it boring. I'm trying to find a school that sort of is a bit more arts psychology rather than medical school. I'm in a medical school, for fuck's sake, which should tell you the kind of teaching I'm getting, which is medically oriented psychology, not like socially oriented. But anyway, but the data is really interesting if you're using it correctly, which is that, you know, more and more with experimentation and rigorous, like, looking at data and looking at like flaws in studies and sort of building on previous theories, is that a lot of these like woo theories, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or, like social isolation, Stanford prison experiment, bystander effect, all of those sorts of things are proving to be backed in the data. Now, they won't say that because that's narrative. Narrative means that they need to be able to dismiss the cherry pick data, but it's really funny how socialism is actually more empirically true than capitalism if you're studying psychology. It's really interesting. Outside of fucking the DSM, which we know what that is, right? And again, I'm not saying that the DSM isn't authoritative, but it's coming from a country who still has a Bible in its fucking like constitution too. So, whatever. People use whatever source is convenient, like I said. But so, the Hitler connection, invoked God when. But basically what happened? Now I'm trying not to do a bad faith reading. I could actually open the book and go, I'm trying to assume good faith here, okay? And I'm sure that wasn't his intention. I'm saying this was my takeaway from my identity that doesn't matter, and my experience that's rude, and that doesn't count for anything because it's only professional experience with 28 years on the internet, and not a fucking peer-reviewed narrow experiment from Harvard University. I'm sorry, I'm illegitimate. I must be a troll for being upset about that. You see how that it's like, whoa! You take it like these little arguments, these little nudges, and then you look at the macro and you go, what the fuck just happened? Now I'm questioning my whole fucking life hypothesis approach. And now, because I'm a good person, I go, is my hypothesis correct? Okay. So I did. I looked at the science around trolling. Now, one thing you must know is that, yes, correlation. Okay. There's a slight, sometimes marginal, sometimes slight, sometimes average, sometimes, but it's not overwhelming. Okay. Unless there's been problems with yeah, exactly. Would you call that Kafkaesque? Yeah. So they accuse everyone else of being fucking all this This is what perplexes me about the fucking right wing of these fucking culture wars, is that they're doing it. They're just doing it differently. It's like, what the fuck? So anyway, I said, what the fuck? My reaction was, what the fuck? Well, that's not very polite. No one's going to take you seriously. You should behave so people take you seriously. No, I'm saying you're a fucking cunt. There's a place for that shit. I've always had, those people like that are like polite, but they say the fucking worst things. And I'm impolite and rude, and I swear, and I'm preaching love and fucking forgiveness at the end of the day, but I use certain words with, because I know that they're persuasive and powerful. These guys can basically gaslight entire fucking groups of complex, cool, interesting people and call them psychopaths, disinformation, conspiracy theorists. I wrote about this. I've talked about this before. I'm going to keep talking about this shit. But, I'm not going to be polite. But then I started to go, fuck, did my recruiter's question on LinkedIn, does that make people think that I'm a psychopath? Is there enough of these middle managers who are digesting this shit and are digesting this nudging that, all these things, these premises that are all up for debate, even though they're saying they're settled, okay? And they're calling it truth. They're calling it reason. They're calling it default. They're calling it, and it's like, have you read about the history of money? Do you know? Do you know that there's these things that are fucking up for debate? Okay? You might be haggling about fucking details about biological sex, largely settled, open to new information with neuroscience and stuff, but there's still people who need help. There's still a clinical framework that needs to be fucking settled on. Relax. Still vulnerable, still need help. Don't be a fuckwit. Okay? I've said this before. What do you want? Trans women to be thrown into the fucking sun because you don't think they're real. Go fuck yourselves. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, so Tetris Toast. I was going to say before, civility doesn't guarantee that doors will be opened or achieve an outcome. Off the top of my head, Was it OTOH? I say top of head. Frankness seems to have value. For example, it's been said that people who swear are more trustworthy. Exactly. And this is what I'm saying about the science. So people who swear are more trustworthy. They have a broad range of vocabulary. It's not lazy vocabulary. It's actually, if you can use swearing effectively and you know the power of it, like I will defend the word cunt till I fucking whatever. But people, or people who speak out admirable. And yes, and trust. People trust people more who swear. People trust me because I'm honest. Well, I try to be honest. I don't filter myself. I don't edit because I could produce that stuff. I can write other stuff, but I try not to edit too much because a lot of the stuff that's real about me comes out, and a lot of the real stuff comes out when I don't. And sometimes I take a while, sometimes I don't, usually when it's first thing in the morning and I'm being a fuckwit. I might start scheduling streams for a little later, but unfortunately it means then that, UK, Americans can't join me. Anyway, no, kidding. We love you, America, you fucking idiots. But yeah, so people who speak out admirable. So what does that say about civility being absolutely necessary? Yeah, it's a big fucking stick. And this is partially, I've been in business as a woman in tech for fucking ever, and I hear it's just the same shit. History doesn't repeat, it rhymes, hey? It's what Brett and Heather say, okay? It fucking rhymes here, which is telling me to be civil when I've had enough, and when I have to read this book, and I read it in good faith, and I took what he had to say in good faith, but then I came away from that book feeling like shit. And then, because he said, well, your feelings are irrelevant. You got to be rational and reasonable in the truth-based community. And I went, well, hang on a minute. fMRI studies show that we make decisions and make better decisions in states and clearer decisions in states of arousal as much as we do not. And that sometimes it can be shown that if you're not showing emotion in a emotional situation, that you actually are dissociating, and that's not a healthy state to be in. This is not settled. And that also emotions can drive, emotions do drive most of what we do, okay, whether we fucking admit it or not. And so this, again, rational choice theory, these thought experiments that have no real application, they are thought experiments, and they're basically like a big fucking straw man. Oh, yeah, well, all things being equal. Well, they're not. All things being equal, men will choose in self-interest. Will they? I don't. And again, I know there's outliers. I'm saying overwhelming. But you make a broad sweeping statement like that about large swaths. No, I think you and your mates are the real fucking psychopaths, and you're rationalizing psychopathy and building whole fucking systems that reward psychopaths and leaving everyone else out, and anyone who swears a bit is a fucking psychopath. Or anyone who makes you uncomfortable is a troll who is a psychopath. Or anyone who's a bit fucking, annoyed with you for gaslighting them and wasting their valuable time because they're a mother of 3 and they're reading a book in good faith where you're defending truth and you're speaking bullshit and telling me I'm not allowed to be upset about it, and that you think my entire fucking career is completely intellectually illegitimate if I won't fucking play nice in the school of psychology that's bought and sold by fucking pharma. Go fuck yourselves. Civility. I like civility if you've earned it. And anyway, so the data. So dark triad, dark tetrad, triad, the few, they add on things. It's always up for debate. Like they use the big 5 personality factors, but there's actually 6. There's the H, hexaco, which is basically the big 5 personality plus H. And H is actually, again, they move on to the new thing and they go, this is the thing that's going to answer everything. No, there's never a thing. There's hundreds of different personality factors resulting in pretty much every human being alive. See, the thing about these genders is they're all mostly just personality factors. Whatever. But, like on a range of, when I talk about personality factors, you've got scales. So introvert, extrovert, neurotic and stable, those sorts of things. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of different sort of 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0 like things. And there's a range in between, right? Fucking, what's with all the fucking trolls today? What's with all the bots? Jesus Christ. Must be talking about something. Oh, I'm talking about trolls. Ironic. Oh my God, I was reading, actually, side point. This made me laugh. I was reading a paper on irony. Okay, the study of irony in humour psychology studies. And he confused irony for sarcasm, which Americans do. They think sarcasm is irony. And then he wrote a whole paper that used sarcastic statements about irony. I said, this is the quality of research we're dealing with here. This is what, it's like, okay, well, that's bullshit. But it was ironic. So I laughed because it was ironic that is an expert in irony and didn't know what irony meant. That's irony. Anyway, so the data is that those who deliberately, with bad intent. So again, that what they did was they narrow the definition of the word trolls. This is the trick. Narrow the definition of the word. This is that good old red, white, and blue fucking, fuck job. This is how they do it, right? A technique. Take a word, a term, mass formation psychosis. Something like that. Take a term, take some sort of concept. And then what they'll do is they'll have a big fucking argument over pedantics, semantics. And this is like the culture wars in a nutshell. You'll see this over and over again, where they'll take a word, like wokeism. The word wokeism is like, well, it has, now it's already got 100 different fucking meanings. Cancel culture, 100 different fucking meanings. And then everyone ends up talking about the meaning of the fucking thing rather than the established literature about it, right? But what they'll do is they'll take a concept, okay, like troll. They'll decide what it means in a way that is useful. So there is a narrow definition for trolls in this sense, okay? So think of someone who deliberately, so you've got difference, obviously, okay, so you've got trolls, you've got cyberbullying, you've got cyber harassment, you've got, people having a bit of fun, you've got comedians, you've got comedy, you've got people who are just letting off steam, you've got people who are vulnerable and angry and like expressing themselves, you've got people who are autistic, don't understand social stuff, they don't understand netiquette, social norms, all that sort of stuff. But trolling fits very much within the realm of netiquette. It's understood, there are conventions, and he's sort of crashed himself onto this culture and made broad sweeping, very useful statements about trolls. Now, what he did was he took the research from the man, the institution, known as, the APA and those sorts of places, right? The APA and those sorts of, I don't know about you, but I haven't hired any Nazi doctors lately. Maybe you should listen to me. I tend to listen not to the psychological institutions that collaborated with Nazi doctors. I'm just saying. I tend to not, associate with people who are Nazi doctors. Call me controversial, but that's a line that I draw. I tend to think they're not terribly reliable. Efficient and good at what they do, but not reliable. Trust me. But anyway, so what they'll do is they'll take something that is a one definition, okay, and they'll narrow it and reduce it down to that one definition, and then they'll argue the semantics over that and leave out 95% of the rest of it. That's an it seems to be well, nothing's uniquely American anymore because it's so, we're on their Fisher-Price fucking internet. But it's a uniquely American sort of switch, language switch, brain switch, and a technique, okay, that seems to be something that Americans do reflexively without even thinking, which is to own the term, own the keyword. I've talked about this before. They own the fucking word. They own the definition of the word. They own the narrative around the word. They own all of the people that they get to fucking stick that word with if it's convenient, like terrorism versus freedom fighting, all that same shit, okay? It's like, well, that's up for debate. Depends on who you're asking. Same thing with troll. Same thing with conspiracy theory. Same thing with all these things. Depends on who you're asking, what it means. Now, So you think about, so basically what they've said is that a troll is someone who deliberately, causes alarm or shock or disgust, like a fucking flasher that hurts people, like basically they do it for, that really narrow definition of troll. That's actually more bullying, cyberbullying. It's more around cyber harassment or cyberbullying, okay? Trolling is an art form, okay? Trolling, Andy Warhol was a fucking troll. Every artist, every musician, Nicki Minaj, fucking, they're trolls. That's arts. So are artists trolls? Okay? Sorry, psychopaths? Narcissists? Well, you get what I mean. But I'm saying, right, professional. But then there was like research around in the positive. So this over here, you got this whole school over here that goes, it's marginally, slightly, maybe correlated with the dark triad. Now, this is where being technically true is okay. Yes, that's technically true. But you also know that most people don't know what a weak and strong correlation means. They don't know that that's not causation. They don't know that the dark triad is open to, question, debate, and all of those sorts of things. These are labels that are thrust on people, okay? They're political weapons as much as they are medical ones, okay, and commercial ones. They are up for debate. They're not fucking settled. And they just go, okay. And then, so there's but also what's interesting is when you understand that side of things, you go into something like a positive psychology school, like with humor. And there's been work on stand-up comedians, okay, and people with comedy. There's different comedy styles, okay? So you've got destructive, non-destructive comedy styles. I won't go into too much detail with this, but I'll probably address it at another point, definitely, because it's really interesting. But you've got comedy that is, so there's, again, in psychology, the problem is that, sorry, my light is held together with tape. No, but this is the thing for me with psychology that was interesting, is that it's very good at saying, just describing. It's descriptive, okay? It's not prescriptive, but people take it and make it into something that is prescriptive and use it in different ways and use your science. And so it's really interesting. So you can say something that's true. This is the thought terminating cliche of science. Something that's technically true, which is there is a correlation between the personality factors linked to psychopathy, sociopathy. And again, it depends on which school you're in, whether it's personality or, or like neuro, whatever, okay? All of this stuff is up for discussion. But, psychopathy, sociopathy, dark triad, Machiavellianism, narcissism. Now, what's interesting is that comedians actually score higher on so-called psychopathy factors, okay? And if anything, it's been used to undermine the idea of psychopaths, because there's, a lot of comedians have found ways to cope with their trauma and their, dispositions and their sort of, tendency to depersonalize and sort of see things differently, turn it into art. Okay. Left that bit out, didn't you? Okay. Now in humor, there's different humor. So even down to the type of joke that you like. There is work here. There's literally, this is what I love about psychology. They've got fucking scales and scores for everything. It's fucking funny, right? They've got the the humor, there's so many of them. Humor style questionnaire, which is the main one. Okay, so there's a sort of a four-way axis between, so you've got humor that laughs at others, okay? You like laughing at others' expense, okay? And that could be anything from sort of slapstick to sort of, awkwardness to sort of anything, okay? I laugh at everything, so I don't give a fuck. There's very few things I don't laugh at. There's laughing at yourself, okay? So people that you make their whole shtick about self-deprecating humor, okay? Now, that's considered sort of slightly unhealthy and destructive, okay? These are things, it's like, this is stuff that's, this is why it pisses me off that people aren't applying more nuance to trolling, because the thing is that there's going to be trolls that fit within all of these areas as well. They have lots of different factors. So to turn around and just call a troll a sociopath or a psychopath who deliberately spreads bullshit, well, what's bullshit? I think we've learned in the last year that there's people who decide what's true and not, and it's not necessarily the truth, okay? This narrative stuff, okay? Now, also not a fucking conspiracy by the Frankfurt School. It's not a conspiracy. It's just, It's the war over fucking people's brains. It's what people do. Okay. Again, an understanding of politics and psych really helps. But you've got these four things. So you've got so laughing at others. Okay. So there's people, and it's actually a fetish. She's actually a philia. Can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Is it gelotophilia? Okay. Then you've got, and the opposite of gelotophilia is gelotophobia, which is something that you are insanely afraid. It's a phobia of being laughed at, and it's a paranoia and obsession with people laughing. So if you hear laughter, you assume they're laughing at you, and all these sorts of things. So it's really interesting. But there's different motivations for humor as well. Then you've got humor that's turned inward at your own expense. Then you've got more I can't remember, destructive stuff. So like you've got the bullying sort of humor, punching down fucking humor, all these things. So anyway, I can't remember. So you got, oh yeah, sorry, my mistake. Let me go back. This is what I was missing. Sometimes I do this because I didn't have notes and I was just trying to recall. So there's the healthy too, sort of healthy spectrum, which is, and again, there's a lot of theory behind this. Generally theory, then generally healthy. There's exceptions. So if your humor is based on connecting with others and being, entertaining others and sort of positive social interactions, pro-social comedy, right? Pro-social sort of, use it as a means of connecting with others and having a laugh and being silly. Okay. Then you've got the other healthy one, which is that it is intellectual, sort of, like a good joke, all that sort of stuff. Okay. Then you've got the one that is slightly more destructive and can be. Anyone in an emotionally abusive relationship will be familiar with this one, which I am, is the jokes, the negging and the sarcasm and all of that, culture wars bro stuff, right? They're sort of punching down, this is why making the claim that all comedy is fucking equal and free as well is not necessarily the case either. So this is where it becomes, the science is good. And then you've got the one where it turns on you. So like Chris Farley or, people like that who've made themselves the butt of the joke a lot of the time, that can be considered destructive, entertaining for others. But there's a combination of things. So some of it's making fun of yourself I make fun of myself to make others see that they're not alone. So that, again, there's a whole bunch of other fucking factors here. And this is where that can be applied to trolling as well, like your motivation for it, like, which is that you could be trolling to make a point, which is what I do. I troll to make people think and go, okay, well, you're not being terribly critical. Everyone's lost their fucking minds right now. Maybe you should think for a bit about this. Maybe you should, as somebody who has reflected on the real outcomes from how she earns a living, let's talk about recruitment. And as an example, let's get people thinking about what they do and how they make a living and whether that can be fucking justified or changed morally. See what I'm saying? Like, I do these things. And same thing like swearing and stuff. I swear. And part of the problem with this book was that a big part of my hypothesis was that I know what gets people's attention. But his thesis was basically that trying to get people's attention is illegitimate. In terms of truth seeking, and that they're incompatible somehow, that you've got to, it's like, well, no, well, fucking good luck with that tree falling in the woods that nobody hears. Like, what the fuck? Like, I say outrageous shit all the time so that people watch my stuff and we have a talk and, get you thinking for yourself and go, okay, it's not hard to go, okay, well, what's the next logical step in what I'm thinking and saying? Okay. Why am I just repeating these things? And that's the problem, is that a lot of people are just repeating things without thinking them through. And they sound true, but they're not thinking on all sides of things. Like men aren't women. Yeah, that's technically true. Good luck in court, because it's a lot more complicated than that when there's a clinical thing and, all these things, right? Shit's complicated. It's almost like shit's complicated and life's hard. It's how the world works. Anyway, I have streamed way too long today. I was going to keep it under an hour. Fucking hell. No, but okay, so with trolling. But, it's where you put emphasis. What I find really interesting is if you can look at media anything, even me, okay? I tend to put emphasis on left-wing thought and alternative narratives like, Russia and China. And, I've been reading a lot about Putin lately, and just trying to read counter narratives as much as possible, especially given that it's so dominant. This idea that, these things that you just take as given, that, like at this point, I question whether fucking Stalin killed anyone. That's how bad it is. You get to a point where you're like, did he kill anyone at all? I know it's more complex. I'm being funny, but I'm just saying, like, the way that they create these false equivalencies between, and again, this big lie that, they talk about these big lies with Hitler and stuff, but like the biggest lie is that, people entered some sort of delusional mass psychosis when they didn't. They were completely rational. And Hitler happened because of completely understandable things that are proven time and time again by psychological experiments and, people's disillusionment and unhappiness and mistrust and rage. That's where it came from. It didn't come from one psychopath. It never does. And there's no such thing as a lone psychopath, generally speaking. But again, I tend to believe, I have a more positive view of people. I tend to believe that there's very, very, very few people who are irredeemable and not able to be rehabilitated. I just don't believe that. With a bit more understanding. And yeah, it's almost like shit's hard to do. And you can't fix people in 6 fucking sessions. Who knew? Oh, don't get me started on CBT. But it's like, anyway, but this whole troll thing, and it made me go, this man sees everything that I do as illegitimate. There's a whole bunch of people who agree with him. No wonder they won't fucking listen to me. I thought that I was actually ahead of it. And, it's like, wow, okay, well, now I see why. I see why I'm not allowed in the club, and why Helen Pluckrose is. I see that now, which is because, the very reason that, it's just really interesting. And again, I'm trying not to do that whole victim thing. I'm actually sitting here going, do I need to change tack? Am I wrong? See, that's the difference between, like, let's say these guys, this is how it is, and that's just how it is. And I go, well, here's the evidence on that. It looks to me like I'm up against the biggest fucking big lie I've ever fucking encountered in my life. And in order to be heard on this, do I need to behave myself? And I also know from, corporate clients and fucking into like tech and all that shit, that no matter how nice you are, there's always someone who takes issue with a woman talking. And they will frame it as fucking whatever they want to get you out of the room. I know this. And I think maybe because I grew up poor and I grew up like, I only had my wits about me. I wasn't fucking good looking, nothing like that. All I had was my brain. And I realized that my brain was not ever enough. It's not merit, because I got the merit. I got the brain, I got the ability, and I've got the fucking passion, and I've got, like, I work harder than anyone I know. Don't let people tell you that there's something wrong with you. There's nothing fucking wrong with you. It's a system, man. Anyway, I live as an example of someone who is fucking gaslit, because I've done everything they said. I didn't just reject it. I've done it all, and I went, fuck this shit. I'm done. You're lying. You're a liar. Like the people who correct spelling and pretend they're the smart ones, when it's actually the thinkers were free to say whatever they want. They just read each other and like built on each other's work. They didn't haggle over fucking spelling. Do you know who haggles over spelling? Corporate middle managers. And they act like they're the smart ones when they don't realise that John Stuart Mill had misspellings too. I mean, it's not misspellings, but, they were free and loose with fucking words and spelling and grammar and shit. If they'd read John Stuart Mill, they'd know that, right? But they don't, because they're corporate fucking midwits and they don't know what they're fucking talking about. And all they do is just repeat fucking memes unquestioningly and call everyone else trolls and psychopaths and sociopaths. Hysterical. Naughty. How dare we? Also, telling women who are 42 years old, political scientist, studying psychology with a 25 plus year career in tech, how the world works. That's a really, you should be thankful that it's only online, because if we were in person, I would grab the nearest fucking tree and shove it right up your fucking ass. Fucking how the world works. You didn't give birth, you fucking assholes. Oh, infantilization of people, infantilization of socialists. That's another thing. Like, like somehow we like unicorns and rainbows and shit. No, this is based in fucking data and economic theory, and like there's a whole bloody school of this stuff that is smarter than you. You're only there because you're a bully, not because you're right. These systems are favoured by the incumbent, not by the most correct, much like the family court. Get the kids and then fucking get them to demonize you, and then that's how you lose your kids. It's not men or women necessarily. Family courts run on data as well. Okay. And it also just favours the incumbent. Okay. So anyway, I am going to go. I hope you've had a great day. I enjoyed this. I'm sorry it was so long. I feel really bad because I was trying to do short ones more regularly, but I think I've been away for a while and I'm still just warming up and stuff. So, but you know, you can watch or not watch. It doesn't bother me. It's all good. I am going to try and start doing some clips. Yeah, Tetris Toast said, people don't ask themselves, what do I think about this? Problem is people lean into a school of thought, inevitable preliminary bias before exploring a topic. Yes, and also, but I think that this is too far in the other way as well. This is where, again, it's not either or, it's both, because there's a lot of people that are like, I'm entitled to my opinion, having done no research at all. That's fucking bullshit too. Like you can have an opinion on stuff and go, what do I think about this? Or what do I feel about it without any evidence? That's a good way to go, but you don't use that to then seek out evidence that affirms that view. Again, like anything, it's just you go, okay, if someone's telling, okay, here we go. If someone's telling you something and it doesn't feel instinctively correct in your gut, then engage with other experts whenever I hear something like a term, okay, this is just something that I do. It's just an easy way to do it. The first thing that I do is I Google that plus critic in Google, okay? And I find what the opposing argument is, because Wikipedia doesn't always do that, okay? Don't rely on Wikipedia, but sometimes people will write, think pieces and stuff that aren't Wikipedia, like blogs and stuff, where they go, okay, I hadn't thought about that. Now, because I'm across a lot of the theory, I can spot the bullshit. So be, a little skeptical. But at the same time, engage with, I can see the woke argument for Joe Rogan, and his responsibility. And I see that frustration. I can understand, not woke. This is more corporate Democrat. They're different to woke. I define, okay. I try not to. I'm saying my interpretation of wokeism and the way that I've described it and intended it over the years is that narrow group of people who are very vulnerable, radicalized, unwell, and lashing out, and thinking that this forming of mobs and that stuff is how they get changed. Now that, again, portion of those probably correlate with the trolling stuff, with psychopathy, sociopathy, narcissism. Now, funny thing about narcissism and the internet, it's an interesting one, because there's no real data that correlates like this stuff with narcissism. It's actually negatively correlated, trolling and stuff, with narcissism, believe it or not. Again, that might be a gendered skew. So psychopathy and my eyelash. Psychopathy and sociopathy are largely correlated with males, and narcissism with females. So it might just be, again, one of those things where they're ignoring relational aggression and various other things, right? Yes, but there's lots of confounding variables on all of these things. There's lots of confounding factors on this stuff. It's not settled. It's a correlation at best with these things. And first of all, like, what the fuck do you get calling trolls psychopaths to begin with? Okay, they could just be comedians. It could be performative. A lot of people do it, you know, for you know their own amusement. Okay, their own expense sometimes. Again, those different reasons and motivations for humor. Different types of humor. Some people like gutter humor and dark humor more than others. Some people like incongruence and irony and those sorts of things. Incongruence is a big part of humor. Americans and people. Here's another interesting thing about humor, is that those that don't like incongruent humor, so like Monty Python and you know that sort of Office, you know, kind of British, what you call British humor. Okay, a lot of it relies on incongruence and you know trying to hold two thoughts in your head at the same time, is that the people who like their humor more literal and more that incongruity solved, right? There's resolution there. That's what they need. It's like literal humor. That's correlated with sort of neuroticism and a lot of the clusters that you'd see in the blue-haired people, which is very interesting. So, and again, when you consider that that's personality factors and largely genetic, doesn't that make you a little more empathetic? And you go, well, they're vulnerable and they think they're, you know, they are disgusted by the comedy. They don't get it. They don't find it funny. They don't see the humor in it because they aren't going to do that. They're not going to see it. It doesn't mean that they're assholes. It means that they're doing what they would do. See how psychology is fucking great? Gives you more empathy. But also these guys are correlated with like higher empathy, higher sense for, you know, like fairness and justice. Again, the people that are talking about the punching down and stuff, they're generally people who don't, again, there's a whole bunch of research around this stuff. It's really fascinating. But Tetris Toast said people don't truly value their own curiosity enough, that they just end up unconsciously parroting someone else's rationale. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why that gets hijacked. And that's why, and when I say do your own research, that sounds fucking stupid. I wouldn't recommend people do their own research either necessarily, because like I said, there's always, if you Google shit, this will be the next stream. Where do the curious go if not Joe Rogan is my question. Where do they go? Where do you go for answers when you know that if you search stuff, it's all now bullshit, or it's going to head you into a fucking dark place? Joe Rogan, nobody's talking about that part, the role that people like Joe Rogan play in de-radicalizing people. And that's where it's like, on balance, I've reconciled this, on balance, his role is net positive, regardless of, you know, a lot of this other like stuff. And most people, again, the facts, people don't know how people watch Joe Rogan. Most people watch Joe Rogan, they go in and out depending on who the guest is and if they're interested. And most people who, when he has batshit conspiracy people on, they go, yeah, that's batshit. And they go, yeah, okay, move on to the next one. That's how people move in and out. There is no real multiverse that is Joe Rogan at the center. Joe Rogan is just more, I've talked about this before, it's kind of an anomaly that people have glommed onto and used in different ways, as I've talked about before. For their own ends. So anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. This was way long. I'm very sorry. But, you know, I'm warming up. I'm going to try it. I'm setting a goal to keep them under an hour. But this one was, I wandered off, and I don't think I should do, I'm bad when I schedule something for 8 a.m. because future Taya is always a better person than current Taya. Future Taya always fucking eats salad and doesn't want to drink and gets up early and exercises, and then current Taya goes, fuck it, where's the snacks? I can't be asked. That's the ADD thing, is the time. Sense is like now and not now. And if it's not now, I'm an angel and I'm going to do stuff. I think, again, you know, you can get to a level of self-acceptance to certain points, but not so much. Anyway, I love you. Stay well. I'm going to do Thursday mid-afternoon, I think. I'll just schedule that. I think I like doing mid-afternoon. Thing is that I do want to have one that includes the Americans, because there are cool Americans out there. And also, like, I'm going to be appearing on a few more things. I think now that I've got a bit more to say about, now that I'm focused, I think it's a bit better. focused on my fucking area and what I'm talking about, not focused generally. Anyway, I'm trying to write a thing. I'm going to be trying to get that done today. I don't like my chances, but I'll do my best, depending on what emails await me when I get off stream, because that's usually the case. I have good intentions and then my inbox determines how my fucking day goes. I'm going to go have another coffee now. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. You can sign up for the VIP now, and you can still sign up at Patreon if you want to do that. And you can also do one-off stuff as well. I like one-off stuff. Yeah. Anyway, I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. Thank you. If you stayed for the whole stream, thank you so much. I'm going to try and I've got to start getting the podcast stuff up and running. So the streams are a separate thing from a podcast. Okay. So the podcast is going to be a bit more structured. The streams are where we riff on ideas, but the podcast is where I kind of maybe it's sort of in between a written piece and a stream. So it's a little bit more structured, but it's a little bit more well-formed than these riffs, this riffing that I'm doing here, which is where I just talk shit for hours and fucking see what comes out. What I do is I watch this back, I'll make notes and turn that into a podcast, okay? Now, whether or not that's going to be a video, I think I should make it video as well, but it might be a mix depending on, because I want to have guests and talk about this stuff and their relationship with the internet as well. So if there's anyone you'd like me to talk to, and you can introduce me, then that would be great. Okay, I'm having a couple of people on that I already have got yeses from that you might be excited to, I'm trying to get a wide range of people. Hopefully, I want to have a space where people can come together and talk. I hate, not debate, but just sort of, talk about the internet, talk about what happened, and maybe solve the world's problems a little bit with no pressure. So, if you've got a really cool story about the internet and you want to come on, by all means, go for it. Oh, you don't have to be anyone. You just be, if you have stories about the old days, or you've had a, harrowing fucking thing about the internet and you want to talk to me for, half an hour to an hour, then most welcome. Okay. DM me, message me, telegram me, whatever you want to do. Intro me to anyone who you think's got a really cool story about the internet, and stuff, and how they've navigated it. Especially also parents and parenting with the internet as well, which is an area. But what the idea will be is that I know sort of most aspects of this stuff, so I'll try to, talk about a bit of history, and like if people have a problem or something that they've gone through, I can maybe explain what was happening on the tech side and what was going on and the conversations that were happening and, what the intentions were, and sort of have a more sort of conversation with users of the internet, and talk to them as though, on behalf of the industry, so to speak. So anyway, I'm going to go. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. Fuck off, Taya. No one likes you. You smell, and your fucking breath smells, and you smell like cat's piss. Not yet. I don't know if Russell's still watching, but we're going to look after his cat. And like, there's going to be all the cat pee jokes and shit. Anyway, love you. Oh yeah, I've also got a pet sitting business now. I'm kidding. Love you. Bye.